"I'm sorry, I can't pay," a single mother whispered softly to a stranger at the train station, her voice trembling with quiet despair. Unaware, he was a CEO millionaire searching for meaning. The station was quieter than usual that evening, cloaked in a stillness that only came with the late hour and biting cold. Winter had crept into the city early that year, its icy breath brushing across the backs of those with nowhere else to be but here, waiting, watching, working. Clara Thompson pulled her son closer as they approached the ticket counter. Her heart, heavy, her coat, faded and 2 sizes too big, did little to shield the chill. Noah, barely 6, coughed into his sweater sleeve, his small frame trembling with each shaky breath. He'd been running a mild fever all day, and Clara knew with a mother's instinct he needed to escape the city, their cramped apartment with its broken heater, and breathe clean air, even if just for a few days. Her sister had offered to take him upstate for a wicker blessing. She just needed to get him on that train. She stepped to the counter, her voice low, cautious, almost a whisper. "1 child ticket, round trip, departure tonight," she said, each word deliberate. The clerk, a young man with tired eyes, nodded and tapped at his keyboard. The price flashed on the screen. Clara reached into her purse, pulling out her worn debit card. Please work, she thought, her heart pounding. Just this once. She'd done the math, been careful. The clerk swiped the card. It beeped, declined Clara's. Breath caught, a sharp sting in her chest. "Try again," she said, forcing calm into her voice. Though it wavered, he did, still declined. She pulled her phone from her pocket, opening her banking app. The screen took forever to load on the station's weak signal, and then she saw it. A pending auto payment had cleared, an overdue utility bill. Her balance was now $3 short. Her shoulders dropped, her face flushing with heat and shame. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't pay right now. Just keep the ticket. I'll come back." The clerk hesitated, glancing nervously at the line forming behind her. Noah coughed again, louder, a fragile sound that pierced her heart. He looked up, cheeks flushed, eyes watery. "Mummy, it's cold," he said, his voice small. "I know, sweetheart," Clara murmured, kneeling to zip his jacket as far as it would go, her hands trembling. "We'll figure it out." Behind them, a man stepped forward, tall, dressed in a dark coat that didn't scream wealth but whispered it. He said nothing, simply handed the clerk a sleek black card. "You sure, sir?" the clerk asked quietly. The man nodded. The clerk swiped, approved. He printed the ticket and handed it silently to Clara. She looked up, confused, her breath catching. Then she turned and saw him. He didn't smile, he didn't explain. His expression was unreadable, calm, steady. But his eyes, they were something else entirely, deep, heavy, not with pity, but with something closer to understanding. Clara stiffened, pride surging. "Thank you," she said quickly, quietly, her voice tight. Then she took Noah's hand and turned away, walking as fast as her dignity allowed. "Mom," Noah whispered as they headed to the platform, his small voice curious. "Who was that?" She didn't answer. She could still feel the man's eyes on her back. She didn't dare look over her shoulder. She just squeezed Noah's hand a little tighter. Back at the counter, the man watched them disappear into the crowd, unmoving as the line of passengers grew behind him. His name was Ethan Caldwell. No one at the station knew it, but he was the CEO of Caldwell Transit Systems, the company that owned the vast train network threading through the city and beyond. Tonight, he'd chosen, as he often did, to forego the private car and executive entrance. He preferred walking among the people his company served. It reminded him of who he used to be. He'd seen many things in his years, commuters, wanderers, one-ways, but something about the woman with the golden hair and hollow eyes struck him. She hadn't begged, she hadn't explained. Her voice didn't shake with desperation, but carried the quiet tension of someone who'd held the line too long and had no ground left to give. Ethan turned away at last and stepped onto the escalator. He could still hear Noah's cough, faint against the station's hum. That sound, he remembered it. Years ago, it had been his own. Cold nights on benches, hunger wrapped in pride, and one moment one person who'd stepped in, paid a fare, and walked away. He never forgot it. Tonight, perhaps, it was his turn to repay that debt. And somehow, he knew this wasn't the last he'd see of her. Ethan Caldwell sat at his desk, long after midnight, the glow of his monitor casting faint shadows across the room. The city lights shimmered beyond the glass, but his mind spun restlessly. He should have let her go, the woman from the station. People passed through terminals every day, but her quiet words, "I'll come back," echoed louder than they should. Noah's cough, her composure, it haunted him. Curiosity tipped into something deeper. He logged into the company's internal database and pulled up employee records. A few clicks later, Clara Thompson, night custodian, hired 19 months ago. Clean record, well regarded. The name stirred a memory. He opened a private browser and typed Clara Thompson, journalist. There she was. 4 years ago, she'd been an investigative reporter for the City Herald, known for a powerful series exposing Titan Constructs, a construction giant accused of dumping toxic waste into rural groundwater. Ethan remembered the headlines. The public outrage. Clara's writing had been unflinching quotes from grieving parents, interviews with scientists, damning environmental data. Then, silence. The paper issued a quiet retraction. Titan filed a lawsuit. Clara disappeared from journalism. Ethan had wondered at the time why no one fought back. Now he knew. He found a buried academic study, published 2 years later, verifying Clara's original claims. The contamination was real. The illnesses were real. Titan had covered it up. She was right, he whispered, his voice low with realization. So why had she vanished? He searched deeper and found the answer. A traffic accident report, filed the same week the scandal collapsed. Driver Clara Thompson, passenger Daniel Reed. They'd been en route to meet a pro bono attorney. The road was slick from rain. The brakes failed. The car hit a tree. Daniel died on impact. Daniel Reed, Clara's collaborator, her source, her partner. A birth certificate confirmed it. Noah Reed, mother Clara Thompson, father Daniel Reed. Noah, the little boy from the station, 2 years old when his father died. Ethan leaned forward, the pieces rearranging in his mind. The look in Clara's eyes now made sense. She hadn't just lost a job, she'd lost the man she loved, her voice, her place in the world. He opened her personnel file again. Nothing mentioned journalism, nothing about the truth she'd fought to tell. They didn't just silence her, Ethan murmured, his voice heavy. They buried her, and yet she kept showing up, cleaning the very halls of the company whose silence had let the truth die. No protests, no demands, just quiet survival. Ethan closed the laptop and sat in stillness. What he felt wasn't just regret, it was reverence and an arising urgency. Clara Thompson had told the truth and paid for it with everything. Now, he couldn't stop thinking, maybe it was time someone told the truth about her. He stood and looked out over the sleeping city, where somewhere a woman swept silent hallways with no one left to speak for her. But that was about to change. The rain fell in a soft drizzle, casting a reflective sheen over the tiled floors of the nearly empty station. It was just past midnight, the hour when most had gone home, and the city surrendered to quiet. Only a few flickering overhead lights remained, glowing amber. Tired, Ethan walked slowly down the hallway of the lower platforms, his polished shoes quiet against the floor. He'd been here before, many times, but tonight felt different. He wasn't inspecting or overseeing, he was searching. And then he saw her. Clara Thompson moved along the corridor, mop in hand, back slightly bent, blonde hair tied messily at the nape of her neck. The janitor's cart creaked softly behind her. She worked in silence, sleeves rolled up, the echo of water hitting tile, the only sound around her. He stopped a few feet away, not wanting to startle her. "You don't know me," he said gently, his voice warm but careful. "But I know you. Or at least, I remember what you stood for." Clara froze, her hands tightening around the mop handle before she turned. Her eyes met his alert, weary, fiercely guarded. "I'm not that person anymore," she replied, her voice flat, edged with fatigue. Ethan took a slow step closer, not intruding, just present. "You were brave," he said, his tone steady. "What you wrote saved lives." She let out a bitter breath, almost a laugh, but without amusement. "It also cost me everything," she said, her voice cracking on the last word. "My job, my future, and the man I loved." Her voice faltered, the weight of those words hanging between them like a storm cloud too heavy to hold back. She looked down, speaking more to herself than to him. "We were driving to meet someone who could help us. Sue Titan, it was raining. The brakes didn't work. He didn't make it. I did." She blinked once, then twice, as if pushing the memory back where it wouldn't hurt so loudly. Ethan said nothing. He didn't offer sympathy or try to fix the silence. He just nodded, a quiet acknowledgement of a truth too raw for comfort. At that moment, small footsteps echoed through the hallway. Noah came running from a nearby corner, his little rain boots splashing against the wet tile. He barreled into his mother's leg, hugging her tightly, then looked up, eyes widening. "Hi, you're the train guy." Ethan knelt slightly to meet his gaze. "Hi there, champ," he said, his voice softening. Noah beamed, unbothered by the late hour or the tension in the air. Clara touched his shoulder. "Say goodnight," she whispered. Noah gave a small wave, then leaned against her side. She turned to Ethan. "Thank you for the ticket," she said, her voice softer now, almost fragile. He shook his head. "My life was saved by a man who believed in second chances," he said quietly. "I just wanted to be that man for someone else." Clara didn't answer. She just nodded once, tightly, before leading Noah down the corridor and into the dim-lit tunnel beyond. Ethan stood still long after they were gone, listening to the silence they left behind. The next morning, Clara opened her mailbox and found a large padded envelope with no return address. Her name was written neatly in black ink. Across the front, she hesitated, then brought it inside, slicing it open carefully. Inside was a folder thick, organized, and familiar in a way that made her chest tighten. She pulled it open. Her old articles, every piece of the Titan series, printed and preserved in perfect order. Highlighted were the most damning sections: environmental data, eyewitness quotes, chemical analysis. Underneath was a stamped copy of a recent report, environmental validation study by Dr. Samuel Carter, an independent scientist she'd once interviewed, now confirming everything she'd written. There was a stack of typed letters next, some from residents of the affected town, others from parents who'd moved away. Each expressed gratitude, relief, and sorrow for what she'd tried to do and what she'd suffered. Then, a handwritten note in elegant script. "You told the truth. I am one of hundreds who were saved because of it. Do not let anyone convince you that you were wrong for being right." At the bottom of the package, a sealed envelope with the Caldwell Transit Systems logo. Inside, a formal invitation. Position: Director of Communications, Clean Tracks for Communities. From Ethan Caldwell. Clara sat on the edge of her sofa, heart pounding, letter in hand. For the first time in 4 years, someone had not only remembered her truth, but believed in it enough to give her a seat at the table. Again, Clara stared at the invitation on her kitchen table for the better part of an hour. It sat unopened now, though she'd read it a dozen times. Her fingers hovered above it once more, but she pulled them back, as if it might burn her. Director of Communications, Caldwell Transit Systems, Clean Tracks for Communities. It was everything she'd once dreamed of before the silence, before the headlines turned against her, before her voice was buried with her partner. But dreams, she'd learned, came at a price. She tucked the letter into the drawer beneath the coffee maker, out of sight, out of reach. Later that evening, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It read, "Would you meet me at the West Side platform tonight? No suits, no pitch, just a conversation." Curiosity warred with caution. She didn't owe him anything, and yet, something stirred inside her. Against her better judgment, she bundled Noah off to her sister's and took the train downtown. The West Side platform was mostly abandoned after hours. One old train car sat permanently parked on the far track, retired from service years ago, with graffiti on one side, rusted hinges, a cracked front window. She found Ethan sitting inside, no bodyguards, no fancy coat, just a man in a simple jacket, sipping coffee from a dented thermos. "You chose this place?" she asked, arms crossed, skeptical, her voice tinged with a faint challenge. He looked up, smiling faintly. "I used to sleep here." She blinked. "Excuse me." He gestured around the old car. "Back when I was 17, after I aged out of foster care, this car was out of service even then. But no one noticed a skinny kid sneaking in at night. It was warm, safe enough." Clara hesitated, then stepped inside, letting the door clatter behind her. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her tone guarded but curious. Ethan leaned forward. "One night, I was ready to give up, just disappear, and a train conductor, an old guy, found me. He sat down right over there," he pointed to the seat beside her, "and said, 'Kid, if even one person believes in you, you don't walk away. He paused, his voice softening. He believed in me, and I stayed. Clara looked away, biting her lip, her heart twisting. I'm not trying to rescue you, Ethan continued, his voice steady but earnest. I know you never needed saving. I see someone who stood for the truth, and they took everything from you for it. That's not right. She looked at him, hesitation still behind her eyes. What if it happens again? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What if they come for me a second time, and this time I can't pull myself back? Then I will stand with you, Ethan said simply, his voice carrying a quiet promise, the kind spoken only when every word is meant. Clara said nothing for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached into her bag and pulled out the envelope. She didn't open it, she just held it in her lap, fingers tracing the edge. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it wasn't rejection either. And for the first time in a long time, her hands stopped shaking. Clara took the job. She walked into Caldwell Transit Systems headquarters on a rainy Monday morning, wearing her only clean blazer and shoes that pinched slightly at the toes. Her badge read, Director of Communications, Clean Tracks for Communities. It didn't feel real. The conference room was full when she arrived. Activists, engineers, PR officers, all turning their heads as she stepped in. Some nodded politely, others stared. Clara sat quietly, keeping her notebook close, her pen tighter. She asked good questions, made strong suggestions, but the glances lingered. They remembered her name. By the end of the meeting, no one said a word to her, but when she returned to her desk, she found a small, sticky note tucked under her notebook. In simple handwriting, it read, Good questions. The next day, another appeared. Sharp observation. They were unsigned, but she knew who they were from. Ethan never said anything directly in the office. He gave her space, let her find her footing, but those little notes were enough to keep her going. Every afternoon, Noah would arrive after school, dropping his backpack beside her desk like he owned the place. He'd draw while she worked sketches of colorful trains with wings, stations floating in clouds, and sometimes little stick figures labeled Mom and Ethan standing side by side. One day, he handed her a new picture. It showed the three of them, Clara, Ethan, and Noah, sitting on a train, eating sandwiches. This is us, he said proudly, when we go places together. Clara laughed, genuinely, for the first time in weeks, her heart lifting. Late one evening, she stayed back to finish a report. The office was quiet, everyone else gone. She opened the drawer where she kept personal files and found an envelope she'd almost forgotten. Inside was a letter Daniel had written years ago, the night before they were to meet the environmental attorney. She unfolded it, hands trembling slightly. No matter what happens, it read, keep telling the truth. Noah deserves to grow up knowing his mother was the bravest person I ever met. Her eyes welled up. She read it again, then a third time. In the silence of that office, she let herself cry, not from grief, but from the weight of finally feeling seen again. The next morning, she pinned the letter to the corkboard above her desk. Later that day, as she poured herself coffee, a senior project manager walked by, saw the letter, and paused. He read it, then looked at her. He said nothing, just gave a quiet nod, and walked away. It was the first time someone in that office had acknowledged her past not as a stain, but as something that mattered. One afternoon in the staff cafeteria, Clara found herself sitting across from Ethan for the first time since taking the job. Noah was with a colleague down the hall, and the two shared a rare moment of stillness. I used to think I needed to be loud, to be strong, Clara said, stirring her tea, her voice reflective. But lately, I think silence with the right people is stronger. Ethan smiled, reaching into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small, time-worn train ticket, creased at the edges, and slid it across the table. I kept this, he said. Clara picked it up. The date was from years ago. The station name was familiar. Her byline had once been tied to a breaking story about an oil spill that shut down that very route for a week. This was the first article of yours I ever read, Ethan said, his voice quiet but warm. I don't know why I kept the ticket. Maybe I was waiting to meet its author. Clara looked down at the ticket, then up at him. For the first time, she allowed herself to smile, not politely, but truly. She said nothing. She didn't have to. It began with a headline. A popular news site published a piece, CEO's Secret Ties to Disgraced Journalist. It hinted at a romantic relationship between Ethan Caldwell and Clara Thompson. questioning her sudden appointment and dredging up her past with Titan. The backlash was immediate. Social media erupted, comment threads filled with speculation, accusations. Anonymous emails landed in Clara's inbox, calling her opportunistic. Some staff whispered behind her back, others stared. Ethan was summoned to a closed-door board meeting. The directors demanded answers, citing concerns about public image and favoritism. Clara, already tired from proving herself day after day, made a decision. She typed her resignation letter that night short, to the point, and left it on Ethan's desk without a note. But the next morning, the letter remained untouched. Later that afternoon, Ethan held a press conference. To everyone's surprise, Clara stood beside him. He stepped to the microphone.com, but unflinching. "She is not here because of me," he said, his voice steady, resonant. "She is here because she is the only one who was willing to speak the truth when it mattered most. She lost her career because of that truth. She lost the man she loved." He paused, letting the words settle. "She saved lives with her voice. I owe her the chance to help more. No spin, no cover-up, just the truth." The room fell quiet. For the first time, Clara saw the crowd look at her, not with suspicion, but with something close to respect. The evening was cool and clear, the kind of night that felt like a pause between seasons. The city's skyline glowed in the background. As guests gathered for the launch of the Clean Tracks for Communities project, the venue was modest. A renovated station platform turned into an open-air stage. Strings of warm lights hung overhead, and the scent of fresh paint and new beginnings filled the air. Clara stood behind the curtain, holding a folded paper, her heart racing. Her name had just been called. Applause waited on the other side. Her palms were sweating. "I can't," she whispered, her voice trembling. Noah, dressed in a small blazer and tie, tugged on her sleeve. "You're the bravest person I know," he said, looking up with absolute certainty, his voice bright and sure. She took a breath, then another, and walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, the crowd expectant. But Clara didn't speak like a journalist. She didn't list statistics or quote studies. She spoke like a mother. "I once believed that telling the truth would always be enough," she began, her voice steady but soft, carrying the weight of her past. "But sometimes the world punishes those who do. I lost a lot, and I almost lost my voice." She looked at Noah in the front row, beside Ethan. "But someone gave me a second chance, and tonight, I'm here not to reclaim the past, but to build something better." The audience stood in applause, but Clara didn't cry, not because she was holding back, but because, at last, she didn't need to. Days turned into weeks, and the project flourished. Clara and Ethan worked seamlessly, like two parts of a machine long broken apart, now finding their way back to motion. There were no grand confessions, no late-night declarations, just quiet synergy, mutual trust, moments of unspoken understanding. He always showed up 5 minutes before her presentations, never sitting in the front, but always in the same row. She always left a cup of black coffee by his side during early planning meetings. Neither mentioned it, neither needed to. One Saturday morning, Clara hosted her first community workshop, Trains, Truth, and the Environment, inside the very station where she'd once mopped floors at midnight. Children from local schools gathered, wide-eyed and restless, as she taught them about clean rail energy and conservation. Noah helped, passing out crayons and worksheets. Ethan stood just outside the door, hands in his pockets, watching quietly. At the end of class, Noah brought Clara a drawing. It showed her standing beside Ethan, both smiling. Above them were little words scrawled in crayon: "Mom and the man with the silent heart." Later, when Clara showed it to Ethan, he studied it for a long time. Then, quietly, he said, "That's the best portrait I've ever seen." It hit fast. One moment, Noah was fine, giggling through a bedtime story. The next, he was burning up, his forehead hot, breath shallow and fast. Clara rushed him to the emergency room in the middle of the night, her coat barely pulled on, shoes mismatched. The hospital's fluorescent lights made everything feel colder, sharper. She sat in the waiting room, clutching Noah's backpack to her chest, heart pounding with helplessness. Hours passed. Doctors came and went. Tests were ordered, IVs connected, and Clara sat alone, eyes fixed on the hallway, too afraid to cry. Then, footsteps. She turned. Ethan. No words, no questions. He just sat beside her. After a moment, He reached out, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. Steady, there. Clara didn't move. She stared ahead, her lip trembling. Then, slowly, her head fell forward into her hands, and for the first time since Daniel died, she cried not from fear, not from pain, but from something she'd nearly forgotten existed. Relief, the kind that comes when you realize you're no longer alone. Noah recovered quickly, the way children often do, as if life itself decided it owed him a break. His cheeks regained their color, his steps grew energetic, and the soft cough that had kept Clara up at night faded into memory. He returned to school, proudly showing classmates his drawings of trains and the project his mum made real. Ethan began appearing more regularly, not just at meetings or briefings, but in the in-between moments. He'd pick Noah up when Clara had back-to-back presentations, sometimes waiting outside Noah's school with a coffee in one hand and a coloring book in the other. Noah never questioned it. To him, Ethan was just there. The Clean Tracks for Communities project reached its first milestone, the launch of its inaugural line, cutting through the very neighborhood once poisoned by Titan's negligence. The area had transformed into a riverside park with walking trails, playgrounds, and a community garden built with volunteers Clara had helped recruit. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Clara stood beside Ethan under a string of bright white lights. She wore a soft blue blazer borrowed from a friend and held Noah's hand tightly. When her name was called, the applause was louder than she expected. She stepped forward, spoke not from notes, but from memory, from truth. When she stepped back, Ethan didn't just shake her hand like the others, he stood beside her. As the event wound down, the three boarded the train together. Noah raced to the window seat, pressing his face against the glass, wide-eyed. Clara sat beside him. Ethan took the seat across the aisle, then paused and moved beside her instead. They didn't speak for a while, letting the rhythm of the tracks speak for them. Then, gently, Ethan turned to her. "I don't need you to say anything," he said, his voice soft but certain. "No promises, no declarations, but if you want to be here, this is your seat. There will always be a ticket waiting for you." Clara looked at him. The fear that had once sat quietly behind her eyes was gone. She reached out and took his hand. Then this time, she said, smiling, "Let's ride together." Ethan smiled soft, genuine, a little surprised. From across the seat, Noah grinned and shouted, "You guys are finally in love, huh?" Clara laughed, full and real, her heart soaring. She leaned in, kissed Noah's forehead, and whispered, "We always were. Just took us a little while to catch the train." The train hummed gently beneath them, gliding along the track like it knew exactly where it was going and who it was carrying. The afternoon sun melted into gold, stretching long rays across the polished windows of the passenger car. Shadows danced lazily over the seats, soft and warm. Outside, the hills rolled past like waves, their green softened by the orange glow of late day. Noah knelt on his seat, reaching into his backpack for a folded piece of paper. With a determined focus, he smoothed the drawing against the train window and pressed a strip of tape on each corner. The paper crinkled slightly as it clung to the glass. The drawing was childlike and bright, done in marker and crayon. It showed a train station, a red and silver train, and three small figures standing hand in hand in front of it, one with yellow hair, one with a tie, the smallest with a giant smile and a cape across his back. Above them, in careful blocky handwriting, were the words, "Our home," and underneath, scrawled in blue marker, slightly crooked but unmissable, "Where the truth began again." Clara glanced at the drawing and smiled, brushing her hand lightly across Noah's head. He'd fallen asleep now, curled against her side, one small hand still clutching a corner of his masterpiece. She leaned back against the seat, and as the train dipped into a slow turn along the hills, she let her head rest on Ethan's shoulder. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The silence was full with memories, with healing, with the soft certainty that they'd finally arrived somewhere that felt like peace. From the outside, the train continued its path, a silver ribbon winding through the earth's gentle contours, moving forward, not fast, not loud, but steady. Ethan's voice came, not aloud, but in the kind of narration that lives inside reflection. She didn't need saving. She just needed someone to stand still long enough until she could rise again. And I did. But somewhere along the way, she saved me, too. If this were a film, the camera would pull back. The train would shrink to a dot, carving its way across, golden hills beneath a sky that was neither ending nor beginning, just becoming. And inside that train, on a journey with no name, sat a woman who'd once lost everything for the truth, a man who'd once forgotten why it mattered, and a little boy who believed in both of them. Not every home has four walls. Some move on tracks, and this one was finally on its way. Thank you for listening to this story of resilience, redemption, and quiet, unwavering love. If Clara's courage, Ethan's silent strength, and Noah's innocent hope touched your heart, if they reminded you of the power of truth and second chances, then we invite you to be part of more stories like this. Subscribe to Kindness Power Stories and join our growing family of listeners who believe that even the softest voices can echo the loudest, that kindness still matters, and that sometimes a simple act of standing still can change a life. There are more stories to tell, more hearts to reach, and more moments waiting to stir your soul. Hit subscribe, stay inspired, and remember, home isn't a place, it's the people who stand beside you when the train finally arrives.